There are various ecological misunderstandings I run into every year with students, and I want to address these now. They're in the lessons themselves, but they need to have special attention drawn to them because I see this one over and over again. Here's the big one: nutrients versus persistent toxins. Persistent toxins are poisons that will not break down, and they are stored in fat tissue. The most famous one of these is mercury. You saw the video on Minamata disease and grassy narrows in Canada. But there are in fact hundreds of these. The conditions for bioaccumulation are simple. The poison must not metabolize, meaning it doesn't break down, and it gets stored in fat. Nutrients do not qualify for this. When you eat a nutrient, it isn't stored in your body, it is metabolized. It means it's turned into something else. So an apple is built from nutrients. It doesn't store the fertilizer that was put on the soil. It uses the fertilizer to build the apple. Biting into an apple, you will not taste fertilizer. Fertilizer is not a poison, and it can't bioaccumulate. But it is a nutrient that in excess can literally feed an ecosystem to death. So do not say on the unit test that fertilizers can poison, not in direct manner of application. Bioaccumulation with a persistent toxin, this was my illustration. These things are like coins in a piggy bank. So this is a little fishy piggy bank. If each of these fishies eats this pile of toxins, then the toxins will multiply by a factor of 10 here if he eats that. So if each of these eat 10, then the fish has got 10 in them. This guy eats 10 of these, he's now got 100. This fish here eats 10 of these guys, he's at 1,000. And finally, the human being gets nailed the most. It multiplies up, providing it doesn't go away. Bee stings cannot bioaccumulate. Alcohol does not bioaccumulate. You have a hangover, you process it, it's gone. Nitrogen for fertilizer has 3 sources in the environment that we have added to it. Human sewage, directly fertilizing our farms, and there's a fair amount of atmospheric stuff because of our cars. These fertilizers break down. You don't get them. The plants are eating the fertilizer. When we dump too much in the environment, the fertilizer makes algae grow like mad in the water. And it's not the fertilizer that kills the fish, it's the algae. It's an indirect effect. So here's an example to keep this straight. This cow's pooping by the apple tree. This truck is spreading fertilizer. When you bite into the apple, it should neither taste like cow poop or fertilizer. None of it's left. It got turned into nutrients. If you put too much fertilizer on the soil, it will run off into the nearby water. Okay, but that's what you have to do. You have to do an excess. There is no fertilizer left in this tree. However, if you're spraying the field with pesticides, and they used to use all sorts of horrible concoctions, permanent pesticides that never go away. One of them was called chlordane. You could have spread it on your field in 1950, it's still in the field. That can be sucked up by the tree, and you will literally find the apple may contain the pesticide itself. So obviously we're trying to make pesticides now that, like fertilizer, break down and go away. If a farmer spilled some mercury on the soil here, it would be sucked up into the tree and you would find mercury in the tree, but you will not find fertilizer in the tree. It can't bioaccumulate. So here is how the algae kills. Okay? 1, when too much algae shows up, it blocks the sunlight. The plants on the bottom are going to die. The green mat on the surface of the water, yes, it makes some oxygen, but most of the oxygen in water comes from wind and waves. So this is like a big saran wrap lid. The oxygen levels in the water are going to fall drastically. Then, as algae is dying and decaying, or the plants on the bottom that were once flourishing are dying, there's a huge rotting mat at the bottom of the lake. And this will cause a CO2 release into the water. So between the O2 disappearing and the CO2 showing up, the fish is going to suffocate. If somehow miraculously it survives, it's eventually going to starve because let's say it eats these plants and they're dead now, the algae may be inedible to it. But some algae can actually directly harm you. The blue-green algae can produce toxins, but it's rarer, and when it happens, we clear the water. It's very dangerous to be near it. So algae blooms most of the time are not directly harmful, but instead darken the water, reduce the oxygen, and increase carbon dioxide level. This is enough to completely kill the lake. You literally fed it to death with fertilizer. But if you watch the videos, the blue-green algae containing that cyanobacteria and other toxic blooms do produce things like that domoic acid that was giving the seal convulsions. And those toxins are persistent and they will bioaccumulate and they'll even survive cooking. So yes, there is a toxin that can be the final result of the algae bloom that causes bioaccumulation, but really the process is not bioaccumulation in the water, it's feeding the water to death. And that's what kills the fish. Not poisoning, but lack of oxygen from the algae sealing the water. The poisoning effect is secondary.